The rescue convoy moved steadily through the cold silence of space, its ships gliding like shadows toward the outer rim colony that had sent out a desperate call for help. The crew aboard the flagship, Horizon, were tired but determined. They carried vital medical supplies, food and engineers ready to rebuild what disaster had torn apart. Captain Lila Navarro stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the view screen where the flickering stars stretched endlessly. Everyone knew this mission was important, too important to fail, but there was a strange stillness that made the hairs on the back of Lila's neck stand up. Communications from the colony had gone dark hours ago, replaced by only faint signals that barely reached them. Suddenly, a sharp warning blared from the radar. "Unknown ships detected," the tactical officer called out, tension rising in his voice. Before anyone could react, the convoy's shields flared as glowing pulses of energy slammed into their hulls, throwing the Horizon sideways. Explosions rocked the smaller ships, alarms screaming as fire broke out in the cargo bays. Panic and confusion swept through the fleet. The attackers appeared from nowhere, sleek, angular vessels unlike anything humans had seen, fast and deadly. The convoy was caught off guard, unable to mount an effective defense. The medical teams scrambled to protect the wounded, while engineers fought to keep engines running. Captain Navarro barked orders to her crew, but the attackers showed no mercy, firing relentlessly, cutting off escape routes and picking off ships one by one. Outside, the void of space became a deadly battlefield, flashes of light marking the destruction of human vessels. On Earth, millions watched live broadcasts from satellites that hovered in orbit. Faces went pale as the images unfolded. A peaceful convoy, meant to save lives, now under siege. Governments scrambled to respond. Military leaders convened in emergency sessions, but the attack was swift and brutal. The question that burned in every mind was simple, but terrifying. Why? There had been no provocation, no threats, only a mission of mercy. The attackers left no demands, no calls for negotiation, just destruction. As the Horizon's captain transmitted her last message, her voice steady but heavy with resolve, the world heard the call to arms. Earth would not stand by and watch its people be slaughtered. Somewhere in the darkness, the enemy's motives remained a mystery, but one thing was clear: humanity was about to change forever. The fragile peace was shattered, and the first spark of war ignited under the cold stars. The news of the attack on the rescue convoy spread across Earth like wildfire, shaking the foundations of every city and every home. In the bustling capitals, government offices lit up as emergency meetings took over every hour of the day and night. The images of burning ships, desperate medical teams under fire, and messages from Captain Navarro haunted everyone who saw them. People gathered in crowds, watching the news with wide eyes and clenched fists, their hearts heavy with grief and anger. Old rivalries between nations, old grudges and political disputes suddenly felt meaningless in the face of a threat that had targeted all of humanity. Leaders from every continent joined a special council, the first of its kind in decades, to decide how to respond. The discussions were tense. Some called for caution and diplomacy, hoping to understand why the attack happened, while others demanded swift military action to send a message that Earth would never be an easy target. But one thing united them all: the determination that such a tragedy would never happen again. Scientists worked around the clock, analyzing fragments of alien technology found drifting near the destroyed convoy. Every small discovery was shared, with military strategists to better prepare for what might come next. Meanwhile, stories of bravery on the Horizon and other ships inspired hope and pride. Captain Navarro, though missing and presumed lost, became a symbol of resilience. Messages from survivors told how crew members saved their wounded comrades, how medics continued their work despite the dangers, and how engineers kept the ships flying long enough for some to escape. These stories traveled fast, spreading a sense of unity among Earth's people and reminding everyone that humanity was strong because of its spirit, not just its machines. As governments prepared their forces, volunteers flocked to enlist or help with relief efforts. Soldiers trained with fierce dedication, engineers rushed to repair ships, and civilians donated whatever they could. The air was thick with anticipation and tension, the kind that only comes before something huge changes the course of history. Then came the broadcast from the United Earth Council. The message was clear and firm. Earth would protect its own at all costs. There would be no retreat, no surrender. The enemy who dared attack the convoy had crossed a line, and humanity was ready to respond with all the strength it had. In secret bases, new weapons were tested, and plans were drawn for counterattacks. Human pilots studied alien ship movements and patterns, learning to predict their tactics. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, they refused to be intimidated. The attacks on the convoy had been cruel and unexpected, but Earth's answer would be sharp and decisive. At the same time, back in the affected Outer Rim colonies, survivors struggled to hold on to hope. Communications were slowly restored, and messages of support and aid flowed in. The resolve of the colonists strengthened Earth's determination to fight for their survival and freedom. Underneath all the military planning and political speeches, a new energy pulsed through humanity, an energy born from pain, courage, and a shared belief that no one would be left behind. As night fell, over the planet, millions gazed at the stars with a mixture of fear and hope, knowing that the coming days would test the very soul of humanity. The war had begun, and Earth was ready to stand tall. The tension that had gripped Earth since the attack on the rescue convoy reached a boiling point as the first strike was planned and prepared in secret, deep within a fortified command center, where generals, scientists, and pilots gathered to coordinate humanity's response. The target was a shadowy alien base hidden in a cluster of asteroid fields not far from where the convoy had been attacked, a place suspected to be a staging ground for further aggression. Though information was limited and the risks high, Earth's leaders agreed that action was necessary to show strength and disrupt the enemy's plans before more innocent lives could be lost. Captain Marcus Reed, chosen to lead the strike force, stood before his team with steady eyes, knowing that every one of them carried the hopes of billions. The pilots were skilled, but vastly outnumbered, and their ships, though heavily modified, were still behind the enemy's advanced technology. Yet what humans lacked in raw power, they made up for with daring and creativity. As the fleet slipped through the asteroid belt, the silence was broken only by the hum of engines and the quiet communication between ships. The asteroids loomed, casting shadows that flickered like ghosts in the void. Suddenly, sensors picked up movement. A patrol of enemy fighters scanning the area. The human ships held their breath and waited, then launched a sudden, coordinated strike. Explosions lit the darkness, and the battle erupted with fierce intensity. Despite the enemy's superior firepower, Earth's pilots used the terrain to their advantage, weaving through asteroid debris and striking from unexpected angles. The enemy was caught off guard by the humans' speed and precision. Amid the chaos, Captain Reed led a daring attack on the base's energy core, aiming to cripple their operations with a single blow. As missiles launched and beams flashed, the base's defenses faltered. But just as victory seemed near, a new wave of enemy reinforcements arrived, larger and more brutal than before. The fight turned desperate. Ships were damaged, and some pilots lost. Still, the humans pressed on, driven by fierce determination and the memory of the convoy's sacrifice. The battle pushed both sides to their limits, each moment filled with heart-pounding close calls and acts of heroism. When the dust finally settled, the human strike force had succeeded in destroying the base, though at a heavy cost. Captain Reed's ship bore scars of battle, but the message was clear. Earth could fight back and it would not be broken. News of the victory spread quickly, bringing a surge of hope to those on Earth and in the colonies. Yet beneath the relief, a deeper understanding settled in. The war was far from over, and the enemy was more complex than anyone had imagined. In the quiet after the battle, the pilots reflected on what they had faced, and what was still to come. Their victory was a spark in the darkness, a promise that humanity would rise no matter the odds. As they returned home, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, carrying the unspoken truth that Earth was awakening, ready to defend its own with every ounce of courage it had. The victory of the first strike had sent waves of hope across Earth, but Captain Marcus Reed and the commanders knew that the war was far from over. What weighed on their minds most was the growing realization that the enemy was not a single unified force, but a fractured alliance of alien factions, some ruthless and bent on conquest, others reluctant participants caught in a web of fear and control, and it was this knowledge that sparked a bold new plan that could change everything. Deep in Earth's intelligence centers, scientists and cryptographers worked day and night to decode intercepted alien signals, searching for any sign of internal conflict within the enemy ranks. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when a hidden message was uncovered, revealing desperate pleas for help from a faction that wanted peace, even offering to betray their warlords in exchange for safety and alliance with humanity. This revelation sparked intense debate among Earth's leaders, torn between suspicion and hope, but ultimately the decision was made to send an envoy, an unarmed mission of diplomats, scientists, and soldiers trained to protect without provoking, to seek contact with these potential allies. Captain Reed was chosen to lead the mission, knowing the risks but also the chance to change the course of the war. The envoy's journey was tense, slipping past hostile patrols and navigating uncharted space toward a shadowy outpost known as the Veil, where the dissident faction was said to reside. Every moment was filled with silent fears. Would they be ambushed? Would their communications be cut? Would this fragile hope shatter under the weight of mistrust? When they finally reached the Veil, the emissaries were met with cautious but sincere greetings, their alien hosts wary but eager to talk. Through a combination of translators and shared technology, the humans learned the painful truth. The attacking warlords had forced many factions into fighting under threat of annihilation, and a large part of the alliance longed to end the bloodshed. As talks continued, tensions remained high. Any wrong word or gesture could reignite violence, but gradually a fragile trust began to form. Plans were made to coordinate efforts, to share intelligence, and to strike against the common enemy. From within, back on Earth, news of the envoy's progress was kept secret, fueling rumors and skepticism, but the commanders pressed on, knowing this was a turning point in the war. The alliance grew stronger as combined forces struck enemy supply lines and liberated small colonies, showing the power of unity against the ruthless warlords. Yet the dangers multiplied. Traitors lurked on all sides, and every success came with new risks. The war evolved into a battle not just of weapons, but of minds and hearts, where diplomacy and courage went hand in hand. Captain Reed found himself walking a narrow line, leading daring raids one day and negotiating peace the next, all while the fate of humanity and their newfound allies hung in the balance. As the shadows of war stretched across the stars, the hope of ending the conflict burned brighter than ever. But everyone knew that the next moves would be the hardest, and that only by standing together could they survive the storm ahead. Fragile alliance forged between humanity and the alien dissidents began to take shape into something stronger and more determined. as Captain Marcus Reed and his new allies moved quickly to build a united front against the cruel warlords who had launched the devastating attack on the rescue convoy. Together, they formed a plan to reclaim the Outer Rim colonies that had suffered under the shadow of war, blending human courage and innovation with alien knowledge and technology to create forces that were faster, smarter, and more powerful than anything seen before. And yet every success came with a cost, as the enemies fought back fiercely to maintain their grip on the shattered territories. Earth's fleets, now bolstered by alien ships, pushed deeper into enemy-controlled space, engaging in battles that were brutal and fast, testing the limits of every pilot and soldier involved. Captain Reed led many of these missions personally, earning respect not just from his human comrades, but from alien commanders who saw in him the spirit of a true leader. The bond between species grew as they learned to trust and fight alongside each other, sharing stories and hopes for a future beyond war. Back on Earth, the population watched the news of victories with cautious optimism, but remained aware that the war was far from over. The political leaders renewed their efforts to support the war, pushing for more resources and better coordination, while scientists worked feverishly to improve the technology that gave them any chance of survival against a more advanced enemy. Each battle was a test of strategy and willpower, where careful planning met the unpredictable chaos of space combat. The enemy, though weakened by internal strife, remained dangerous and desperate, willing to sacrifice everything to hold on to power. In one intense encounter near a vital mining colony, the United Forces faced overwhelming odds. Their fleet, outnumbered and outgunned, yet human pilots performed daring maneuvers that caught the enemy off guard, while alien ships used new energy shields and weapons to protect their allies. The battle raged for hours, filled with explosions, near misses, and heroic acts that would be remembered for generations. When the dust settled, the colony was freed, and the Alliance celebrated a hard-won victory. Yet beneath the joy, there was no room for complacency. Captain Reed and his team knew the warlords would retaliate with greater force, and the fight for the Outer Rim was only the beginning of a much larger conflict. Meanwhile, as they moved forward, the Alliance faced challenges beyond the battlefield. Differences in culture, language, and tradition threatened to create cracks in their fragile cooperation, and tensions sometimes flared between human and alien leaders. It took patience, diplomacy, and the shared goal of survival to hold the Alliance together. Reed found himself acting as not only a warrior, but a bridge between worlds, using every skill he had to unite his allies. In purpose and resolve, rumors spread of secret enemy weapons and betrayals from within the Alliance, forcing the commanders to stay vigilant against threats from all sides. Every step forward was hard fought, but the unity of the front gave hope that the war could be won. As Earth's combined forces continued their campaign, colonies once lost began to dream of peace and rebuilding, inspired by the courage of those who refused to give up. The story of humanity's defiance and the strange friendship born in war became a beacon across the stars, proving that even in the darkest times, hope and unity could light the way. Captain Reed looked out over the fleet gathered in the vastness of space, ready for the next mission, knowing that the war was not just about survival anymore. It was about forging a future where different beings could stand together as one. The road ahead was long and dangerous, but for the first time, Earth was not alone. The united front was strong, and the stars held the promise of a new dawn. The final battle for control of the Outer Rim's central system arrived with a storm of fire and steel that stretched across the dark reaches of space, where Captain Marcus Reed and the united fleet of humans and alien allies prepared to face the last desperate stand of the ruthless warlords who had plunged countless worlds into chaos. Tension crackled through the command ships as strategies were finalized, and every pilot, soldier, and engineer braced for the fight that would decide not only the fate of the colonies, but the future of all species caught in the conflict. The enemy forces, though battered and fractured by the Alliance's previous victories and internal dissent, had rallied under a terrifying new weapon, a massive warship capable of unleashing devastation on a scale no one had seen before. Its energy, beams capable of slicing through entire fleets in moments, and its shields seemingly impenetrable. As the battle began, the vast expanse of space was torn apart by the roar of engines, the flash of laser fire, and the pulse of missile barrages. Captain Reed led the charge, weaving through the chaos with fierce determination, calling on every ounce of skill and courage his team possessed. Human ships dodged and darted around the monstrous warship, while alien allies targeted support vessels and supply lines, working in perfect harmony despite the diversity of their origins. The fight was brutal and unforgiving. Losses were high on both sides, but neither would yield. Throughout the battle, the pilots felt the weight of history pressing down on them, knowing that failure meant the end of freedom for their people and the end of hope for countless innocents. Amid the chaos, unexpected acts of heroism rose like beacons. Soldiers who sacrificed themselves to protect comrades, engineers who repaired critical systems under fire, and pilots who executed impossible maneuvers to distract the enemy. Slowly, the Alliance found ways to chip away at the warship's defenses, using new technology developed in collaboration between human and alien scientists. When the massive vessel finally faltered, a coordinated strike led by Captain Reed's squadron shattered its core, sending a shockwave through the battlefield that signaled the beginning of the enemy's collapse. As the remnants of the warlord fleet scattered or surrendered, a cautious silence fell over the field of battle. The victory was hard-earned and costly, but it marked the end of the war that had consumed the Outer Rim and threatened Earth itself. In the days that followed, peace talks began with the fractured alien factions and Earth's leaders, discussions filled with hope and uncertainty. Captain Reed, hailed as a hero, spoke not of glory, but of the future, a future where different worlds could live together without fear, where old wounds could heal, and where humanity's fierce spirit had helped shape a new era. Colonies began rebuilding, alliances grew stronger, and the stars, once cold and distant, now held the promise of friendship and cooperation. Earth emerged not just as a survivor, but as a leader among the stars, its people forever changed by the trials they had faced, but unbroken. The story of the rescue convoy's attack and the war it sparked became a legend, a reminder that even in the darkest times, courage, unity, and hope could ignite a new dawn for all.